I'm Paul Duval, and you're watching 11 bone-chilling Britannic facts. Ready or not, let's dive in. Starting us off at number 11. In 1975, French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau was invited by the Greek Ministry of Tourism to search for possible underwater remains of the mythical city of Atlantis in the Aegean Sea. During the mission, he came in contact with the Titanic Historical Society, who asked him to look for the wreck of the Britannic. While his search for Atlantis proved to be unsuccessful, on November 13, 1975, something very large appeared on sonar. They'd found it, and unlike the Titanic wreck, which was over 12,000 feet down, the surprisingly intact Britannic wreck lay only 400 feet below the surface. To put this in perspective, the sheer length of the 883-foot-long Britannic meant that as she was sinking, her bow actually hit the sea floor while her stern was still above the surface. Now let's take it back to 1912. Following news of the Titanic tragedy, it should come as no surprise that demand for transatlantic travel sank significantly, forcing the Britannic's builders to make several notable modifications during the construction of Britannic to increase safety measures. More lifeboats were added, making the total number of lifeboats equal to 48 in comparison to Titanic's 20 lifeboats. Other major changes included the introduction of a double hull along the engine and boiler rooms, and raising 6 out of the 15 watertight bulkheads up to B deck. A more obvious external change was the fitting of large crane-like davits, each capable of holding 6 lifeboats, making the Britannic an even safer ship in theory. Next up at number 9. Did you know that the Britannic was the largest ship lost in World War I? While her sister ship, the Olympic, was designated by the British Admiralty as a troop transport ship, the Britannic was requisitioned as a hospital ship. She was freshly painted in the internationally recognized hospital ship colors, a white hull highlighted by a green band and large red crosses. Inside, the luxurious fittings were replaced with basic hospital interiors, and the venerable Captain Charles Bartlett was given command of the ship. After completing 5 successful voyages to the Middle Eastern theater and back to the United Kingdom, she was on her 6th voyage to pick up wounded soldiers when at 8:12 a.m. on November 21, 1916, a loud explosion shook the ship. The cause, whether it was a torpedo from an enemy submarine or a mine, was not immediately apparent, but what was apparent was that she was sinking fast. Now, 4 years earlier on the Titanic, Captain Smith had had the benefit of a much slower rate of flooding, along with the invaluable advice of designer Thomas Andrews to help him formulate a plan of action. Captain Bartlett had no such luxury, and in less than 1 hour, Great Britain's largest and finest ship had sunk to her premature watery grave. 30 were dead or missing, but had the explosion occurred on the return journey with the ship's wards packed full of thousands of sick and wounded, the potential number of killed or injured would have been astronomically higher. And at number 8, in an all-out panic to get off the sinking ship, crew members hastily lowered 2 lifeboats against Captain Bartlett's orders near the stern of the ship. No sooner did the boats hit the water than a strong tide carried them directly into the Britannic's port propeller, which was still spinning at a dangerous speed. These 2 boats were smashed into pieces by the propeller, and the people in them were either badly mutilated or killed. Take a look at this eerie photo, where you can see the very same propeller that took the lives of these helpless people. Now, a stewardess in one of these ill-fated boats was carried completely around the propeller, and beyond a few cuts and bruises and her clothes almost torn off, she was not severely injured. This lucky stewardess was none other than Violet Constance Jessup, which leads us right into bone-chilling fact number 7. Violet was already quite familiar with sinking ships, as she had survived the Titanic sinking only 4 years prior, and I'm sure the 29-year-old British stewardess had some choice words to say in the matter, as she gathered her coat, ring, clock, and even a bread roll from the breakfast table. Recalling how much she had missed having a toothbrush on the Carpathia after the Titanic had gone down, she also made absolutely sure that this time she would not make the same mistake. Like I was saying a moment ago, Violet was one of the passengers on the ill-fated lifeboats. In spite of all her years at sea, Violet had never actually learned how to swim, but she knew that she either had to jump out of the lifeboat or be chopped into pieces by the propeller. She leapt overboard and nearly drowned, suffering a head injury in the process, but somehow found her way back to the surface and was pulled into another lifeboat, cheating death once again. Next, over at number 6. After surrendering at the end of World War I, Germany was forced under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles to hand over some of its ocean liners as war reparations, 2 of which were given to the White Star Line. The ship that was given to replace the Britannic was the SS Bismarck, which was the largest ship in the world at the time. Interestingly, the Bismarck wasn't even fully completed yet, and German builders had to finish her construction before handing her off to the British. Salty German shipyard workers even attempted to sabotage the Bismarck, setting her on fire and badly damaging her in the process. The ship's handover was understandably tense, and when the British arrived, they found their quarters incomplete, whereas their German colleagues' cabins were finished perfectly. In the case of British Captain Hayes, his temporary quarters were being used to store wash basins. The White Star Line renamed the SS Bismarck to RMS Majestic, and upon arrival in Southampton, she became the flagship of the White Star Line fleet and proved to be extremely popular during the 1920s. And at number 5, while the Titanic had an orchestra, the White Star Line's plans for the Britannic's musical entertainment were on a whole new level of grandiose. A Philharmonic pipe organ was set to be installed on board the Britannic, but because of the outbreak of the war, the instrument never made its way to Belfast from Germany. After the war ended, the organ wasn't claimed by the Britannic's builders, since the Britannic sank before she ever entered transatlantic service. It also wasn't installed on the Olympic or the Majestic, since the White Star Line didn't want it, perhaps due to the fact that it was manufactured in Germany. After this, the organ disappeared for nearly a century and was thought to be lost or destroyed. However, in April 2007, the restorers of a Welty Philharmonic pipe organ detected that all the major parts of the instrument were signed by German organ builders with the inscription Britannic. And upon further investigation, it was proven that this was in fact the organ originally intended for the Britannic. This beautiful piece of history can currently be heard playing in the Museum of Music Automatons in Switzerland. Up next at number 4, whispers about artifacts taken from the Britannic by Jacques Cousteau had echoed across generations of divers, with much speculation surrounding the ship's bell. The bell is the heart of a ship. It signals the watch, rings for ceremonies, and of course sounds the alarm. The bell sounded on the Britannic to signal all on board that the ship would soon sink, and it was likely the last man-made sound anyone heard before the sea swallowed her up in a thunderous clap. Bells are the highest prize for shipwreck hunters, and this one, the bell of Titanic's sister ship, would have been a crown jewel for an explorer like Cousteau. Some said Cousteau raised the bell and kept it in his private collection. Others said he took it to a museum in Athens or elsewhere in the world. Cousteau was silent on the subject. Did Cousteau raise the ship's bell and hide it away? Finally, in 2019, the mystery of the missing bell was solved when divers found the bell, which had fallen from the mast and now lay directly below the crow's nest on the seabed. And for bone-chilling fact number 3, in 1996, the wreck of the Britannic was purchased by British oceanographer Simon Mills for £15,000 from the UK government. When asked why he bought the Britannic, his response was, "I haven't the faintest idea. The only justification I could think of at the time was that I was single, had a well-paying job, and had money to spare. Seemed like a good enough reason to me, but his father didn't seem to think so." When he found out what Simon had just purchased, his response was, "You've done what?" Coming down to number 2. So what actually sank the Britannic? In a 2003 expedition into the wreck, divers brought back some of the first photographs from the inside of the wreck and found that several watertight doors were wide open, leading experts to the conclusion that either the explosion coincided with the change of watches or the blast may have distorted the door frames. A number of mine anchors were located off the wreck by sonar expert Bill Smith, confirming the German records of U-73 that the Britannic was sunk by a single mine and the damage was compounded by open portholes and watertight doors. And at number 1, perhaps one of the grimmer moments in Britannic's recent history occurred during a May 2009 expedition of the shipwreck. Sunday, May 24th began as another typical sunny and tranquil day, and at 12:56 p.m., the last diver Carl Spencer dipped below the surface en route to the wreck. All seemed to be going according to plan, until another diver noticed something was wrong. Carl not only looked very uncomfortable in the water, but the sight of so many bubbles immediately above him suggested that he was no longer on his rebreather and had instead switched to his open-circuit bailout cylinders. More concerning was the fact that Carl was coming up fast. Too fast. A fellow diver came to his aid and helped slow his ascent, but at 40 meters, Carl switched over to a new cylinder and immediately began to convulse, forcing the support divers to rush him to the surface. He sadly died moments later, and it was soon discovered that Carl had incorrectly marked that last cylinder as air, when in fact it contained a nitrox 50 gas mix. Breathing this gas mix at a depth of 40 meters would very quickly have subjected any diver to a condition known as central nervous system toxicity, whereby the partial pressure of oxygen rises to a potentially lethal level in the human body. This one mistake proved to be fatal, and the rest of the expedition was suspended following the accident. I'm Paul Duvall. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future.